have a very busy day of news for you today. But first, we have a very special guest.
Hello, everyone.
This is Aubrey. She's a history PhD student at Stanford University. That means she finished elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. And now she's in a super special learning program where she can become a history expert. Isn't that cool? Aubrey is going to help us with our special segment today on protest. Okay, so what do you all know about protest? Well, there have been a lot of protests happening around the country lately. They've been in cities like Ferguson, Missouri, New York City, New York, Baltimore, Maryland, and Chicago, Illinois. And my parents say that they have all been very important. But Aubrey, I'm not sure why.
Well, I can certainly help you with that, Naomi. How about we start with the definition of protests?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, a protest is a statement or action expressing your disapproval for something or your objection to something. So maybe when you don't want to take a bath that night, and you tell your parents you don't want to take a bath, or that you don't agree with taking a bath, you're staging a protest.
I do that all the time.
Yes, many of us do that when we're young. Baths are good, by the way. You should take those. But there are also much more serious types of protests that affect a lot of people.
Like what?
Well, our country has a bad history of treating people differently because of their race. So people have protested for a very long time in different ways.
Well, that's not fair at all, because we're all the same.
You're right, we are all the same. But many people have been treated differently through history because of the way they look.
How are they treated differently?
Well, for a long time, they were forced to do work for other people that they didn't want to do. And
My mom talks about not wanting to go to work all the time.
this is different. Many people back then were not even paid for the work they did. Other people made them work and kept the rewards for themselves, and this continued for almost 300 years.
Oh my goodness, that's a long time.
Yes, it was.
Why didn't they protest it?
Well, many of them did, but it was really dangerous because the unfair people would hurt them. So the protests were often unsuccessful.
Oh man, that really sucks. I would hate to live during that time period. What happened after the 300 years? Was everyone treated the same then?
Well, not quite. The same people who were forced to work were then not allowed to vote or buy houses or live where they wanted. That was really sad. They couldn't have certain jobs and they couldn't go to certain schools.
Why weren't these people liked? Did they do something bad?
No, they were treated meanly simply because they looked differently. And it was really unfair.
Please tell me they protested all of that.
Well, actually, there was a really big movement called the Civil Rights Movement. And many of these people demanded they be treated the same.
And once everyone was finally able to talk it out, the unfair people realized they were wrong and everything got better, right?
I wish. But then the government and other unfair people didn't always listen to the concerns of those who were treated badly. And sometimes they ignored them.
Well, if I were being ignored, that would make me protest even more.
That's exactly what they did. How about we watch a few videos and talk about protests and their importance?
Oh, yay! I love movie time.
Me too. Do you know who Dr. Martin Luther King was?
I sure do. He was a civil rights leader that did really good things for people with the help of other women and men. We learn about him a lot in school.
Great. This first video is of Dr. Martin Luther King, and he's explaining why people needed to protest and their importance in the 1950s and 60s. Let's take a look.
Okay.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
He makes a lot of sense in that video. Did things ever get better?
They sure did, Naomi. Now it's illegal to treat someone differently because they look different than you, and people can get into trouble like that.
Well, it's about time. But wait, the 1960s was 50 years ago. Aren't there protests still happening today?
Right. So earlier you talked about the protests happening in cities like Baltimore and Ferguson and New York City and Chicago.
Yeah. What's that about?
So the good thing is that it's now illegal to treat people differently because of their race, but the bad part is that people still do it.
But it's illegal.
Yes, Naomi, but our legal system hasn't always protected everyone. And today, it still doesn't. People are still being hurt and put in jail unfairly because of the way they look. Let's take a look at this video. She's a very successful lawyer and college professor, and she talks about the way we still discriminate against people.
In the United States, young people are shuttled from decrepit, underfunded schools to these brand new high-tech prisons. They're targeted at young ages, often before they're old enough to vote, stopped, frisked, searched, interrogated about who they are, where they're going. The old forms of discrimination that we supposedly left behind during the Jim Crow era are suddenly legal again once you've been branded a felon. That's why I now believe we have not truly ended racial caste in America. We've merely redesigned it.
Wow, she's very smart. So is that what people are protesting now?
Right. Now people are protesting so they can let our nation and the government know that it's not enough to just make it illegal to treat people differently, but rather those laws have to be taken seriously and enforced.
Ah, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any videos of the protests happening now?
You read my mind, I sure do. Let's take a look.
Oh, goody.
We need to go home. We need to fill ourselves up our love. We need to come back tomorrow stronger. This whole movement has been made out of love. This whole movement has been made out of unite. We need to time to re-elect ourselves, love ourselves, fuel our spirits, and continue this fight. Whole streets? Our streets! Whole streets? Our streets! Whole streets? Our streets! Whole streets? Our streets!
They seem kind of angry, but I guess they have a right to be. I'd be angry too.
You're right. Many people are angry. But like you said, they've been treated unfairly, so they have a right to be. It's important for us to remember that although protesters may yell and get upset, they're only trying to make their lives better for themselves and their families. They just want everyone to be treated equally and be treated well.
I want that too. Maybe I'll go out and protest.
I'll go with you if you'd like.
I'll go grab my sign. All right, everybody. We'll be right back to talk more news after this short commercial break. Black Lives Matter.